Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, how are you?
Doing good, man. A little bit of a flu game situation out here on the West Coast, but we're fighting through it. Pop might have to take a little more of the dialogue today, but we're doing what we can.
Appreciate you toughing it out.
What are you going to do, man? Super Bowl week. Got to get through it. So we'll have our Super Bowl pod coming for you guys later in the week, hopefully when the situation's feeling a bit better. But for now, we're going to do mostly Commanders talk today. It's going to be our Commanders off-season pod. Long overdue for a breakdown of what was a magical year. But how are you feeling, Pop? I mean, went from 4-13 to 12-5, 2 road playoff wins, including beating the number 1 seed and a lot of teams' Super Bowl favorite Lions. Of course, Lions fans will lead you to believe that they were the worst team in the NFL when we beat them. But to that, I say, hold your loss. I'm glad you enjoyed your extra week in Cancun. And you'll have to see us again next year, and we will be better. So enjoy it. Get used to this feeling. Anyways, Pop, how you feeling?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a mixture, right? There's sadness because the season's over, and we're in long drudgery of off season. There'll be a lot of exciting things to talk about, I'm sure. So there's definitely sadness over, it ending and how it ended, but can't help but be really excited. I would say I'm super excited. I'm super confident about the future. I really believe that this is just the beginning of what this team is going to accomplish under this leadership, under this quarterback. And, just no one could have predicted what we were doing, getting in the NFC Championship. I wish there's still things about that game that just bug me, but it is what it is. It's how things worked out. Eagles getting fined left and right on stuff that they didn't even get flagged for during the game, but we're going to skip over that. That's not why we lost. But yeah, overall, I mean, like I said, those would be the two things I would say. I'm excited and I'm confident about where things are going.
I like it. I feel the same way. The loss still stings. I'm still disappointed. It took a while. I mean, I didn't feel myself for most of last week. Honestly, I was pretty sad. But is what it is. Bottom line is the cruel thing about the NFL is we spend all year celebrating and rooting for our teams, and 31 seasons end in disappointment. It's just how it goes. And last year I guess was a bit of a weird year because you knew by about week 6 that this thing wasn't going anywhere. So we were kind of enjoying and embracing the tank and looking forward to new changes. But when you're a good football team and you get to have fun every week like we did, we had fun 12 out of the 17 weeks of the regular season, and we had fun 2 of the 4 weeks of the postseason, right? So when you're a team like that, the trade-off is it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt when it ends. And unfortunately, I mean, look at Buffalo, look at Cincinnati, look at Baltimore, look at Philly up until maybe they have a chance to right that this year. But there's been a lot of teams that have been towards the top of the NFL and been really great in the last 5 years, and they still end on a sad note. So I guess we can hold our heads high that Detroit's one of them too. Hold our heads high that we're among that class, or at least performed among that class this year. You could argue with somebody that's not on this podcast if you don't agree with that, because me and Pop are standing on that. Season shows it, but it's good to be thinking of ourselves in that way and to have the team actually back it up. And I'm excited for where this thing's headed. And for me, the headline of what to be excited about is it looks like our coaching staff is making it out of this pretty much unscathed. The jobs that Brian Johnson and David Blau have been up for have either been filled or we're actually blocking. We're not allowing David Blau to go off and take those interviews elsewhere. That news came out this morning. And headline, Cliff Kingsbury will return for year 2. He's not leaving.
Yeah.
So
that reminds me of that Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not leaving.
I'm not ever leaving.
I'm not leaving. I think it would be funny. Maybe he did that, behind the line. If we had a little bit more resources in our production department, maybe we'd make that video. But no,
Yeah.
having Cliff back for a year or two, his contract situation is nuts. I think like between what we're paying him and what the Cardinals are still paying him, it's incredible how much money he's making, and he's got an opportunity next season to be a lot more picky. I think very good chance he'll be a top candidate next year. So very good chance this is the last time we've seen him. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with the other assistants and whether or not something will happen there. It's only natural. Dan Quinn talked about it, but I think year two, having Jayden have that stability at OC for at least the first 2 years of his career is great. And it's great news having Cliff back for sure. Yeah.
Yep, and especially for me, the news of Brian Johnson and David Blau staying in the building is awesome because I think everybody at this point, with how last year went and how we anticipate next year will go, especially as we add some more help on the offense, it's a tougher schedule next year, but I feel like we say that every year, oh, tough schedule next year, and it never ends up being that tough. But
I'm not worried
regardless,
we can play with anybody. That's something that we've proven at this point.
Exactly. Regardless, you expect there will be enough success next year that Cliff will go on and be a head coach if the right situation becomes available for him after the season. And that means the heir apparent is going to have to be ready. And I think that's a big difference between this staff as opposed to the staff that was built in Atlanta by Dan Quinn, is that we've got guys like David Blau and like Brian Johnson are probably number one and number two in terms of guys that could take over at that offensive coordinator position should Cliff leave. So I find it equally encouraging that Cliff is staying. Particularly David Blau is a name I'm really excited about. He's 29, really bright offensive mind. You've heard him be brought up a few times as a guy that has installed some plays or been important in the program over the course of the year. And you get him another year and you basically say, hey, man, look, we all know Cliff's gone after this year. Follow Cliff around, get everything you can get, make sure you're ready to go because it's your job when he's gone. And hopefully you can just pick up things right where they left off. But at the end of the day, as long as that boy Jayden Daniels is playing quarterback, I think this team's going to be in pretty good shape. And I think the numbers are irrefutable in terms of proof that, yes, the system and the scheme, of course, has helped Jayden. It helps every quarterback all the time. A good play caller makes a quarterback better. But the talent is undeniable. And when you get to these types of numbers and you start to talk about all these records being broken and things of that nature, it's a situation of the product being greater than the sum of its parts. And both people, Cliff and Jayden, performing at an extraordinary level. So Jayden performing at an extraordinary level does not go away when Cliff.
Yeah, we just want to take a moment to do some Jayden Daniels appreciation. We've been appreciating him all year, but if we're doing a bit of a wrap-up show or what we're calling our first postseason show of 2025, even though we still got a Super Bowl to play, we just want to take a minute to give him his love, and that's all what it's all about. Yeah, I can tell that you're feeling pretty good, son.
Yeah, I just had to let Pop know. Hey, I'm feeling.
He's like MJ in the flu game.
It was dicey. It was dicey at the start, but we got the vocal cords warmed up and we're moving along. We're
those golden pipes.
I said I was going to let Pop do most of the talking. I think I've talked for 6 of these 9 minutes so far.
It's all good.
You guys wouldn't have it any other way. Come on.
Yeah. But you bring the energy, I bring the wisdom. That's how this works.
There it is.
Not that you don't have wisdom, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Run down some of these Jayden Daniels stats for the people, Pop, while we're doing this Jayden Daniels appreciation here.
Historic season by Jayden. I think you've seen these. 4,390 passing yards, 1,025 rushing yards, including the postseason. Had the most touchdowns ever by a rookie, 37 total, 30 passing, 7 rushing. When you think 30 passing touchdowns, this is a running quarterback, right? 30 passing touchdowns. Just blows you away. 5 of those touchdown passes were in the postseason, and he had 1 rushing touchdown in the postseason. This is a crazy stat that I picked up as I was doing some research for this. Most rushing yards in a regular season by a quarterback without losing a fumble in NFL history.
Yeah.
Not talking rookie, not talking anything. In NFL history, he went 891 yards, never fumbled the ball. Pretty amazing. And just in general, how he protected the ball. And then, of course, last bullet led us to an NFC Championship game for the first time in 33 years. Enough said. I think his reaction to it all was crazy too. You could tell how badly he wanted to go to the Super Bowl and put that on his resume as well. But what else can you say? I'm sure you're going to have a few things to say about Jayden. Just I said it from training camp. So did you through to now. He's one of one in terms of the type of player he is. He's already getting ranked as a top 5, top 10 quarterback by a lot of people. We are in such great shape having this kid. What a great person. Probably should have started with that. What a great person.
Yeah, it's the Terry McLaurin effect in terms of the person. It's like as great of a player as he is, he seems like he's an even better person, which is an insane thing to say because he's a phenomenal player. But overall, man, he's a stud. There's no two ways about it. He's just an absolute stud. Like you said, Pop, when I read that stat, I saw it on Twitter as well, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, that's right. He never fumbled the ball. And like I'm trying to remember, like I can't believe the kid never put the ball on the ground in all this whole season. It's nuts. And maybe he had one in the pocket or something like that, but I don't remember it if he did. I think there might have been one or two that like Beatis recovered or something like that. But
yeah. Possibly.
I mean, guys more than likely fumble the ball. The dude touches the ball 50 times a game. But the fact that 891 rushing yards with no fumble, his numbers in the regular season were better than Lamar's numbers in 2023 that won him the MVP. And then he went on to win 2 playoff games after doing that. So let that sink in terms of how incredible of a year Jayden Daniels has had. That's the best I could say for you on that. The kid is unbelievable. And you could tell I saw that emotion, and I think that emotion came from, first of all, just an elite competitor that this kid is. I think he wakes up every day, and before he even brushes his teeth, he's thinking about how he can win the next football game that he's playing. And on top of that, I don't think it's this like forced or like fake thing. It's what makes him go. Like you can tell and you can see from the just raw emotion. And I think he wanted an opportunity to be the first rookie quarterback to go to the Super Bowl. And I think he was thinking about, I have an opportunity to not only be the first rookie quarterback to go to a Super Bowl, but to be the first rookie quarterback to win a Super Bowl and to bring a Super Bowl back to this team. So I think it was really impressive on his front. And just in terms of Daniels as a whole, man, he's an incredible player. He's an incredible person, it seems. And I think he's trending towards real greatness here in DC. And we're all already doing all our theorizing for the offseason and such, but it's going to be a ride. It's going to be a fun ride these next few weeks. And we're about to go into our offseason preview here, talk some free agency and all that. But what I didn't notice, what I realized, a great benefit of making a deep playoff run, free agency is only 5 or 6 weeks away by the time you guys are hearing this. Free agency is right around the corner, man. It used to feel like when you're checking out in early November, it used to feel like free agency was like eons away. But that extra month of getting to play some football definitely makes it feel a whole lot shorter. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We don't know what the team's going to be like, but there's every reason, and be a great lead into our next topic. There's every reason to believe the roster is going to improve, right? So I think there was some great signings. We got a lot of things to figure out. We'll get into that here in a second. But just as a starting point, we'll be breaking this down every week for you through the course of the off season. But like I said, we kind of are thinking of things in the context of just bringing this current team back. But, I think that the word is 30 free agents in this group.
Yep.
So, even if you only sign half of them, there's still a pretty big roster turnover incoming. So it should be exciting, and I think people are going to want to come here, play for Dan Quinn, play for this organization, and play with Jayden Daniels.
Yep. And some of those guys, I mean, a guy like KJ Osborne is an example of a free agent. So some of these guys are guys that are pretty far down the bench. Michael Davis, Michael Dieter. Can't imagine they're breaking down the door to bring him back. Benjamin St. Juste. There are guys that are pretty far down the depth chart that are not necessarily going to hang around, or guys that were kind of practice squad gems that we found that have been good that maybe hang around but at a low cost. So stuff like that. But today we're going to get into the top guys. One thing I want to highlight before we do this, just to go a little bit off script, but it's something that I've been thinking about, right? We had the most roster turnover in the NFL last year. And we're probably going to be darn close to it again this year, honestly. I think there's going to be a pretty decent roster overhaul. The difference for me, we've already talked about Jayden Daniels a bunch, so we're going to take him out of it, even though, of course, he's the most important thing. We say it on this podcast all the time. If you have a quarterback that can compete at an elite level, he always gives you a chance. Aside from that, let's look at the core of this team last year compared to this year. Last year, you had McLaurin, and you had maybe you bring back Sam Cosmi, and you're like, Daron Payne and John Allen are playing okay. They're signing a lot of money, but they're decent, and that was it. That was all you had in terms of what you trusted on this team. Now, you've got McLaurin, you've got Cosmi, you've got Biadasz, you've got Mikey Samerstill, you've got Frankie Louvu that you're feeling good about. You hope they can get a deal done with Jeremy Chin. That's something we'll talk about. You've got Zach Ertz, who seems like he wants to come back as well. You've got Jayden Daniels, who, of course, makes the huge change. You still have Payne and Allen both under contract. We'll talk about Allen a bit later. But the core is completely different. Marshawn Lattimore is here, and I know that we'll have a dialogue about that later. But Marshawn Lattimore is here, and he's a part of that core, whether you like it or not. It's a completely different dynamic now in terms of the core that we've built. And I think even just looking at Samerstill, Louvu, and Biadasz, just those three guys make a huge difference in terms of how you approach free agency, approach building this team moving forward. I mean, these guys are studs, and I think these guys are trending up. And I think another year in the system, they get even better. So it's exciting stuff. But in terms of guys,
I hear what you're saying about the roster turnover. I'm not sure I'm completely on the same page because I think there was something magical about this group and this team, and I'm sure they're going to want to try to keep the team together. But if you think about it, like we talk about it at work sometimes that one, if you don't need to hire 10 people, right? You hire one person who's outstanding at what they do, and that can do so much to help the rest of the team, right? And I think that's the thing. Like the roster turnover could be 10, 15 guys. But if you get the right 10, 15 guys on top of that core group, bring the right guys back, I think that could be a special situation because there is an interesting dynamic here where some of those vets are so important to some of the young guys. So you might want to keep them in the building. Hopefully we can get some heir apparents going to a Zach Ertz, to a Bobby Wagner. But let's get into these top 5 questions of the offseason in honor of Jayden Daniels, if you didn't get that. I think we were one of the – I know other people do it now. We were one of the first people came up with this top 5. Check the tape in Jayden's honor. But let's get into this.
I like it. So obviously you're looking at our top guys coming out of, in no particular order here, but some of the top guys are the names that you've heard the most this year. Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, Dante Fowler, Jeremy Chin, De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown, and Tress Way.
Item number 1, obviously, is which free agents we should bring back.
Yeah,
just to set that up.
So these are our top guys that are going into being unrestricted free agents. And yes, which of these do we think we want to bring back or re-sign? I'll be quick on my take. I think Tress Way is a no-brainer. He's coming back.
Of course.
I think Zach Ertz is probably a no-brainer. I think you bring him back. You bring him back on a 2-year deal with a 1-year option, team option for the next year. Not much guaranteed for that second year, or guarantees if we click in the option, whatever it is. Similar for Bobby Wagner. He's an all-pro linebacker. If Bobby Wagner wants to stay, you keep him. I don't care that he's 34. I think you bring him back on another 1 or 2 year deal if he wants to play. Let him play. You could talk about heir apparents, but he buys us another year to find an heir apparent if you keep him and if he plays at the level he played at last year, which again was an all pro level.
Yeah.
Dante Fowler, I'm willing to let him go. I think he's bad in the run game. He's made a couple splash plays in the run game. Overall, I would like to completely overhaul the edge position. Maybe we get into that later. Jeremy Chin, give him whatever he wants. Keep him around. I think he fits the identity of the team. I really like the player. Seems like a good dude, too. And I think he's a superstar in the making. I think it's like a Sam Cosmi deal where if you sign him now, by about midway through next season, you go, wow, his price went up, and it went up a lot. So I think you keep Jeremy Chin. De'Ami Brown, for the right money, keep him. Noah Brown, he can go. Not super interested in keeping Noah Brown around. Didn't really see a drop off in the offense when he left. If anything, saw the other guys who were getting more targets kind of step up a little bit more. But thank you for catching that Hail Mary and for playing well, being thrown into the team kind of late. But that's a journeyman. That's not a guy that I think we need to put a huge emphasis on keeping around. And De'Ami Brown, you bring back as a third or fourth option, I'm cool with. Go ahead, Pop.
No, I was going to say, I think especially like I'll work backwards a little bit. I think I'm pretty much in sync with you.
Yeah.
I think De'Ami, I'd rather bring De'Ami back than Noah just because I think he's got upside still. And I don't think we missed a beat. I mean, the reality is when he stepped in and he did it in a critical part of the season,
I think we got better, frankly.
And he'd be a great guy to, hopefully not our number two option. Hopefully we can, and we're going to talk about the wide receiver position as part of these top five things. But, so yeah, I'm pretty much in sync with you. I'll just go really fast. I agree. Ertz and Wagner, bring them back. Maybe try to get their heir apparent on the roster. Maybe if they aren't already there, like with a McGee, just have him step up in
or a Senate, yeah,
or a Senate, have him step in a year or two. The tight end group's one I'd almost like not want to worry about. Just bring back the same group. Hopefully, Senate steps up. Ertz was just fantastic. Wagner was fantastic. I kind of agree with Fowler. I think he, just with Fowler and Chin, some of it to me is just how much are they going to command? How expensive are they going to be? Fowler had a great year, but you're just not going to get him probably back. Somebody's probably going to get, a little aggressive in terms of the talent he has. He is a top talent in terms of the draft and probably overpay a little bit for Dante Fowler. And I agree with you. Edge is one of my top targets for returning. There's some other interesting names on here. Cornelius Lucas, wouldn't mind bringing him back on the cheap. I like the idea of keeping that offensive line intact and then stacking on top of it, upgrading it. And it might be that some of these guys got to slide to different positions or go to the backup role, right? So we'll leave it at that because we got other things to talk about. We can keep rolling. We'll probably spend a whole pod going through the free agent list.
Yeah.
Let's get on to number 2.
One more quick one. Sorry, I know you said we got to roll. Noah Igbenogany, bring him back. He played really well.
Good call.
Good value.
I agree.
Our second best DB over the course of 17 games this year, next to Sam still. I'm not counting Lattimore on that list. Definitely bring him back. He's been great. Gonna have to we're gonna have to do a whole second pod for the Zane Gonzalez Austin Seibert situation.
We're gonna have to figure out kicker for sure, but
we'll see. Hopefully it's neither of them. Respect to both of them and what they did for us this year. Second thing, most important, keeping the guys that are in the building and happy. Terry McLaurin, last year of his 3-year, $71 million contract. He's 29. Obviously, last year he was an absolute stud. 82 catches, 1,096 yards, 13 touchdowns, 14 catches, 227 yards, and 3 touchdowns in the postseason. Just a perfect year for Terry. And let's not forget, Terry got off to a really slow start this year. A really slow start. There was a point where him and Cliff had to kind of dialogue, and Terry had to say, yo, get me the ball more. And believe it or not, even though that point seems to have happened every year for the last however many years in Washington, Cliff actually did it. Him and Jayden built the chemistry, and he became just an absolute stud. I mean, 13 touchdowns. You knew he was the guy you were looking to in the red zone. They still couldn't stop him. I think let's keep the Terry segment fast. You give him a blank check, right? Whatever he wants.
Yeah, you got to extend Terry, and I think it actually kind of complicates a little bit. We'll get into the wide receiver position, I think, next. Complicates what you do next because I don't think you can bring one of these free agent guys in and pay them more than Terry. I just don't think you can do that. I mean, if Jamar Chase was available, maybe. But so I think that complicates that conversation because I don't think we can pay two guys $30 million. I mean, he's coming off a 3-year, $71 million contract. So what's that? 23, 24 a year. I mean, he's probably up for a little bit of a raise. So, but yeah, I agree. You got to extend Terry just for so many different reasons. And I think that combo of him and Jayden grew throughout the year, improved throughout the year. And I think they'll keep the momentum. They'll have a whole offseason to work together. So I'll keep it rolling. John Allen. My quick take on John Allen is why not keep him around? I guess he could be some trade, fodder if you can get a great offer for him. But I also think he's a guy that understands where he is in his career. I think he wants to be here. I don't think if you have to re-sign him after this season, I wouldn't extend him. I'd just keep him around on his current deal. And we have cap space to do that. If you want to extend him or bring him back, it's probably at a much bigger discount than where he is now. Worst case, he plays an incredible season and, on a contract year, and you get that out of him. But I'd keep him around unless you got an offer that you couldn't refuse, right? In the Godfather sense.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the free agent class for defensive tackles,
he's still our best tackle in defense.
Yeah, and I think you have to think about it, man. Is his wins above replacement is positive still. You saw the way the defense played when he came back. He's better. He makes Daron Payne better. You're stuck with Daron Payne. I hate to break it to you guys. The way Daron Payne is produced in the last year, nobody's trading for that.
I'm good with running it back at D tackle. I really am. I'm okay with it.
Too.
I'm okay with it.
That's what I'm trying to get at here, man, is I think it's the edges that are the issue. And I'm not saying these guys have played up to their contracts. I don't think they have, either of them. However, I think Allen, you either extend on a 1-year prove-it deal or you figure out a restructure where you can get him some guaranteed money this year, some guaranteed money next year, and maybe one more year with an option or something along those lines. But maybe
they're not dominant, but they've been good to very good. That's kind of the thing, They're not the elite tackle that we see play on some other teams, but there's probably only 2 or 3 of those guys in the league.
Well, those guys are not available.
Yeah,
those guys are not available. This isn't Madden franchise mode.
There's one in the Chiefs. There's one in Philly. One or two others, but
like I said, it's not Madden franchise mode. You can't trade Daron Payne and 3 first-rounders for Dexter Lawrence. They're not going to pick up the phone. This is not how this works. So I think, if you look at the free agent tackles that are available, I think you maybe add guys underneath. Like I think Osa Odigizua. I will learn how to say your name correctly if you come here. I think that's it. But he's from Dallas. That's a guy that's been talked about pretty highly, and that Quinn seems to love. And they're looking at like a 3-year, $62 million market value, roughly, according to SportRack. That's something I'd be interested in bringing in, and he can play that 3 technique on the edge the same way Payne can. That could be some help. You also drafted Johnny Newton, so you got to get more from him, particularly in the run game. But I think I would extend John Allen as well. I'm not saying it's not a Terry McLaurin situation. If he wants to go to the highest bidder, that can't be Washington, in my opinion. But I'd be willing to pay him another couple years, a restructure situation, if you will. Moving on, wide receiver. We'll probably keep this one pretty quick. I don't want to spend $30 million on T. Higgins. I don't. He's a good football player. I really like T.
You can't have two $30 million receivers on the roster. That's the bottom line. You just can't. You can't.
Again, he's a really good football player.
Yeah.
I think he will go make the New England Patriots much better, or wherever he goes and signs. There's injury issues with him. There's availability issues with him. I think he wants to go be a number 1 somewhere. I don't think he wants to go be a number 1B. A guy that I would be really interested in is Chris Godwin. I think
Great.
if you run it back with Diami left or Diami right, Terry left, and Chris Godwin in the slot, I think that's a pretty sweet combo. However, I don't think Chris Godwin leaves Tampa Bay. Stephon Diggs, I have no interest in. Coming off an ACL, he's 31 years old. I love the player. The person, there have been questions about everywhere he's went. I don't know the guy. I don't want to speak to that. But I don't want to invite any of those questions into this locker room either. He's a Terp, though, so we always give him the benefit of the doubt. Amari Cooper. If Amari doesn't want top money, we could have a conversation about that. And DeAndre Hopkins, I have no interest in. I think he retires after this year.
Yeah, it's not a amazingly attractive class once you get off the top couple of guys who will end up being too expensive. So it'll be interesting. I mean, they do need another wide receiver. I believe that, but
Yeah.
who? Maybe it's somebody that's sort of down the list a bit, that's got a lot of upside, a younger kid. Maybe they, I'm hearing it's not the best of wide receiver drafts, although wide receivers seem to be pretty plentiful these days. We'll see. But I think it needs to, it'd be great if they could add somebody. I'm not in the run it back mode on so much on wide receiver. It's just when you look at these options, they seem really limited, right?
Yeah, I think, a guy like Marquise Brown probably intrigues me more than anybody else that's available. Nick Westbrook-Akine as well as somebody that I'd keep an eye on. But I think we're going to be shopping in that tier.
Could
I
be a
don't think
trade
we're going to
too.
be.
Maybe it's a trade.
Maybe there's a trade. There's some Garrett Wilson and some DK Metcalf talk. I will say, I'm trying to keep it smart because we got Adam Peters. You give them what they want for DK Metcalf. If DK Metcalf is available, you give them what they want because you put DK Metcalf next to Terry McLaurin on this offense. Holy crap. Holy crap. And he's a stud in the run game, too. Big physical body receiver, loves to block. I would be all in. We could probably talk about that on another pod. We'll have some air to fill. But yeah, I think DK Metcalf would be a trade name I would love. Speaking of trades, number 4 on our list, the one trade we did make this year, the big trade, well, we made 2 trades, but the big trade we made this year that blew everybody's mind, the Marshawn Lattimore trade. Been a lot of dialogue about whether he's been worth it, what his future is in DC. I'm still in the wait and see camp. I think 2 things can be true at the same time. I've said it. I'm not particularly blown away by the way he performed all year. I think he was inconsistent. I think he had 2 bad games and 2 good games. I also think it's really hard to come in to a new situation off an injury, which clearly was a legit injury, and not have an off season, not know the scheme, and just jump in and go. And especially at cornerback, I've said it a million times, it's the hardest position to play in pro sports. I do not think that's easy for him to come in and just immediately be dominant like that. And maybe he's not at that point in his career anymore where he's an absolute, Darrelle Revis type lockdown guy. But that doesn't mean he doesn't still have value here. And I still have faith after a full off season with Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. getting to know the system, being in Washington, getting acclimated here. I still think he can do it.
Yeah, I think, the quick take on Marshawn for me is this year was a disappointment. I mean, it just was.
Yeah, no 2 ways around it.
You could see he's a really good player. He was nursing that injury. Adam Peters, I think, said it best. Love to get an off season with him. Those hamstring things can be nagging, can stick with you. I hope that's not the case. He had no choice but to bring him back. I think he's still a really, really good player. He's got to cut down on the penalties. It's great to be aggressive. He's also got to just fit within the scheme that they want to play him with and not, say I've got to be the guy that locks down the other team's best receiver. He seemed to perform better when he was playing within the scheme. Worth keeping around. This year was a disappointment. That'd be my quick take.
Yep, that's my take as well. I 100% agree. Like I said, I think once they figure out how to use him here a little bit better and once he's healthy after a full off season, if he can be fully healthy again, we'll see. I think he'll be a stud. In terms of the draft, our last item for today, top 5 positions of need for the draft. What do you think? Or our top positions, not necessarily top five, but what's
Yeah, for
somewhere you're
me,
looking in the draft?
I'll go quick. For me, number one's offensive line. I just think you got to invest in Jayden Daniels. I think the five guys we got are all right, maybe six with Cornelius as a swing tackle. I'd love to bring a left tackle in and slide Coleman either guard or right tackle. I think it just gives you more flexibility, gives you more depth. If there's a stud left tackle available, he's my pick. Bottom line. Second option for me would be edge. You talked about it. I think where we suffered on the offensive line and we suffered in the run game, honestly, was in the edge, the inability to set the edge. So if it was a stud edge, I'd be okay with that. That'd be mine. Later in the draft, I think getting more weapons, a stud running back, speed at running back. Speed at running back would be my emphasis. Of course, a wide receiver would be awesome. I'd probably go wide receiver, give the edge to wide receiver, depending on what happens in free agency. And that's a big part of this, what happens in free agency. If you address wide receiver in free agency, maybe that speed running back would be a good option the second, third round. But those would be my quick takes on the draft. I want to go off the offensive line. If I had my druthers, left tackle with that first pick.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's a guy, Josh Connerly out of Oregon, that looks like he's going in that 25-ish round right now. There's a tackle out of Missouri, Armand Membu, that looks like he's going around 32 they have, so he might be there. I would go offensive line is number one for me. For me, I think our biggest need is actually interior. I think our biggest need is guard. I think Coleman played a lot of really good games this year. He had a couple bad games. We're forgetting he's a rookie, in my opinion, and I'm still not so sure he can't be a stud for you at tackle. But the way the offensive line is kind of trending in the league nowadays is you get your best five athletes out on that line and they figure out how to play their positions. So generally, the better athletes on the offensive line are playing tackle because that's just a more premium position. So I would love to get a tackle on the O-line as well. First round, man, when you're picking 29, it's going to have to be best player available. That's just the bottom line. So I think you go best player available. I wouldn't mind if you took corner. I wouldn't mind if you took an edge. I wouldn't mind if you took a running back. I wouldn't mind if you took a wide receiver. I think if a good wide receiver falls to you, a guy that you don't expect to be there, if a Luther Burden is still on the board, I don't think he would be, but if he is, I think you take a look at that. I think if the kid out of Ohio State, Ibuka, I think his name is Emeka Ibuka or something along those lines, I think if he's there, you take a look at that. There's a lot of interesting options. I would even, frankly, Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. I do not care if you draft him number 29.
Dominic, we're gonna do a draft breakdown pod.
What I'm saying is you can do anything at that position. Get a difference maker though. That's all I care about. We have enough holes.
And a lot of it depends on what they do in free agency too, right?
Yep.
If they address some of these spots. I feel like edge is a spot, maybe they can do something in free agency. If they want to make a big splash, there's some big names out there. All O-line seems a little bit more of a reach, but I don't know. I haven't done the research.
Yeah.
But a lot of it does come down depending on that. And good thing is, it's a 12-win team, not desperate. Not desperate.
I wouldn't be surprised if we don't pick on day one. Also, just to wrap it up, knowing our boy Adam Peters, he loves to stack draft picks, and apparently, from what I've heard, the strength of this draft is between like 20 to 60. They say is where the best value is. So I wouldn't be surprised if you trade out of 29 and try and get some extra seconds or thirds.
You can trust one thing: we're going to give you tons of draft coverage coming up.
Yep,
tons of draft coverage, tons of detail. Dominic pressing me, already rattling off names and prospects. I'm gonna lean heavy on him.
Hey man,
for that kind of detail. I'm gonna tell you what position I want. Honestly, I don't know a lot about these guys till we pick them, and then I'll do all the research that's necessary. But I think we should wrap this sucker.
Let's do it. Let's wrap this thing up. I will say it ain't all that hard to have a tab of Take-a-thon open on the browser while you're going through the pod and call out a couple names you've heard before. It's not all that hard. But anyways, I appreciate the Pop always gassing me up on my ball knowledge here. But let's wrap this thing up, guys. It's been a lot of fun. Jam-packed podcast of content today. we could talk about this Commanders team for an hour and a half. But let's wrap this thing up, guys. Without further ado, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
And thank you for another great week, everybody. And hail to the Commanders.
Hail.